there, your writing mentor Jim Parsons back again with lesson 12 of Write That Novel Now. This week, and for a few weeks I would suspect, we're going to be talking about show, don't tell. This is the one that can make or break your writing. If you've done some writing, you may well have had someone critique your work and it come back to you with something underlined and a note in the margin, show, don't tell. So, okay, what is this? Why is it so important? Readers like you to show them things and let them figure it out. They don't want to be told. For example, if you have a gentleman deliver some statement to a group and then look down at his shoes, if you write that, the reader will start to think, I wonder if he's telling lies, or what is he embarrassed about? But that's the reading process. That's what they want to do. That's why they're at the page. They don't want to be told, Bill looked down at his feet because he was lying outrageously. They don't need to hear that. That's telling. Right? Now, that's a very unsubtle way of telling. There are many ways of telling that are quite subtle and you won't even figure that you're doing it. And they're the things I'm going to expose in the next few weeks. The best thing I can tell you to do is to think of your manuscript cinematographically. Pretend that you're a movie director making a movie. When you go through your script, your manuscript, there are going to be some key scenes there that leap out at you. Probably at least one every chapter. There jolly well should be. At least one, perhaps more, that occupy each chapter. Now, they are the key scenes. If you are making a movie, they're the ones where the camera will come in very close so that you can see every twitch of the eye, right? If you're doing a scene where a battered wife is expecting abuse from the husband who's come home drunk, we're going to get some close-ups of her face. We're going to be almost able to read her fearful thoughts. We're going to see a slight tremor in the hands. We're going to watch her eyes drop and look at the closed fists of the man. This is showing. Now, when that movie's run, if you're seeing that scene, you do not expect to see text run across the screen that says, Mary is scared. No. And when you write your book, if it's a similar scene, for goodness sake, your text should not be, Mary was frightened of Bill, right? Show. All these things that you would show as a movie. Get your camera lens in close and show what's happening on your victim's or potential victim's face. Show the tremor of the hands. Show her gaze drop to the man's fists. Don't just say she was scared. You're relying too much on the experience of your reader. You're not jogging any memories of fear for them by just saying she was scared. That's the importance of showing in a key scene. And when it comes to description, the same thing is true. It was a hot day. Okay. If you live in Greenland, what does a hot day mean to you? If you live in a desert, what's a hot day? You need to specify a few things. Let the reader experience it with their senses. We're going to do all this in a later lesson, but I'm going very quickly over some that constitute what is telling. Saying it was a hot day, that's telling. So think like a movie director. Key scenes. Now, in every movie, these key scenes have to be connected up with something else, right? There's got to be some way of getting from one key scene to another. And that is also true of your novel. There are bridges that you have to build. So there's some bridging text between your key scenes. And that is allowed to be a little flatter. In fact, sometimes it's good to bring the level of tension down a little bit before you bring it back up. So bridging scenes don't have to have as much attention paid to them for show, don't tell. In a movie, if the character has got to fly from London to Sydney to meet someone important, what will you see? You'll probably see that character, we'll call him Bill. You'll probably see Bill at the airport with a suitcase, maybe checking in. You'll undoubtedly see a wonderful shot of the plane taking off and its wheels folding up. I mean, we can't miss that one. I love it myself. And then you'll probably see another airport scene, maybe with a few signs up that say, welcome to Sydney. So That's a bridging scene. Nothing important to see there. And so you're getting from one key scene to another with 3 little movie shots, long distance shots. They don't focus on the man's face at all. When might you show inside the plane? If he happens to sit next to someone, a stranger who becomes an important adjunct to the plot, then you've got to play that scene out. But if you're just getting Bill from London to Sydney, you do it speedily. It would occupy a sentence or 2, paragraph at the most. That's a bridging scene. I'd like you to go through, if you've got a lengthy work that you've written, go through and either with a highlighter or a pen, isolate where key scenes begin and end, and have a look at what's in the middle. There are the bridging scenes, the introductory scenes. When you've isolated your key scenes, then, as I talk about these different aspects of show, don't tell, you can take each of those key scenes and scrutinise them, saying, now, did I do it here or there? I can assure you that if you follow what I'm talking about in these lessons on show, don't tell, your writing is going to improve 100%. But I am well aware it's not as easy as it sounds. It's easy for me to say it, but I am aware it's not so easy to do because A, some of these things escape us, and B, sometimes we don't understand how to fix it. So they're the sort of things I hope I can communicate to you in the next couple of weeks. The chief thing for me to communicate is how jolly important it is to detect these things and to master these skills. The only way you will beat it is to practice, to go over and look at things, even if initially you only find 1 out of 3. That'll be a breakthrough. Your writing is not going to change overnight. It's not enough for me to say, hey, this is show, don't tell, now you know how to show, because old habits take a long time to kick. You will automatically go back into the writing style you've always used. That's why you've got to become your own writing mentor, your own editor. Sure, let it all flop out on the page. That's great. That's creativity. But when the time comes to go back through it with a magnifying glass. Actually go looking for each of these patterns. Here's a great tip. Are you using Word or another word processor that's similar that allows you to search for a particular word or phrase? Well, as we get into these lessons, and I tell you some of the key terms to watch out for example, he thought or he thought that. That's a surefire telling piece of writing. If you have to say your central character thought something rather than just show the thoughts, you're starting to tell. So if you use your word processor, set it up right in the find box, the search box, the find, type in thought, or better still, thought that, if you know you use that phrase, and let it find all these instances for you. If you're lucky, maybe there's only 1 or 2. If you're unlucky, no, if you're lucky, because it's far better for the word processor to catch all these things for you, because then you know you've got a problem and you can deal with it. Let the word processor find these things, because even as you read through, you may overlook them because you're so accustomed to writing that way. Let the word processor find terms like he thought or she thought. He wondered. There are a couple of the terms that I introduced to you last week. Once you've found them, have a close look at the sentence. Can you let it ride? Is it okay? And sometimes it can be, particularly if it's just in a bridging piece. But if it's a key scene and you're starting to tell your reader that your main character was thinking about something, this is where you could convert it to showing what they're thinking about rather than bothering to tell them that they're thinking at all. So that's a good tip for you. Okay, well, that's an introduction. That's the sort of thing we'll be doing in the next few lessons. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to show you 3 areas within the key scenes that it is important that you show and don't tell. All right, let's look at some of the terrible truths of show, don't tell. There are 3 places in particular that you need to take great care to show and not tell. And they are when you're revealing emotion and mood, especially in dialogue, when you're describing action in your key scenes, and when you're describing and developing character. Let's have a look at these. The first two I think we can do together because it's rare to have a scene that doesn't do both describe actions and emotions and mood as well. So let's have a look at this piece that I've written. Let me assure you it's telly. So let's have a look through it. Bill was furious with his mother for the ugly things she'd said about Sarah. He refused to believe it was true, but now he had to see Sarah that night. The seeds of doubt had been sown. He yelled a few home truths at his mother, stormed out of the house, jumped into the car and slammed the door. He was so mad, in fact, that he threw caution and common sense to the wind, accelerating so hard that the car swerved and gravel sprayed from under the wheels. Down the long tree-lined drive he sped, the car gathering speed until he was almost unable to make the turn onto the main road. Gripping the wheel in anger, he rammed the accelerator to the floor, forgetting that the bend ahead concealed the railway crossing. As he skidded the car round the curve, he saw too late that the gates were down and enormous freight wagons were trundling across the road. Well, okay, as far as writing goes, it's okay. It gets the message across. Sounds a bit exciting. We know Bill was cranky. It uses some good solid verbs. Gravel sprayed, car swerved. He jumped into the car, stormed out of the house, slammed the door, etc., etc. They're all good, strong action verbs. So what can we do to improve? We're clearly being told this story, even in an imaginative, exciting way. It's still being told. I'm going to break it up into small bits and let's have a look how we might change it. Let's first look at Bill was furious with his mother for the ugly things she'd said. Now, saying that Bill was furious, that's telling. That's his emotions, right, his response. So let's have a look at this. I want to make it very clear that you're not to read the old line as being an introduction to the new. The second piece totally replaces the first. So where the first started with Bill was furious with his mother, a straight out telling statement, we've replaced that with dialogue. So the story now starts with dialogue. Mother, I know my own wife. She is not out gallivanting while I visit you. He was trying to keep his cool. His mother was a picture of control, of course. This was her special field. With deliberation, she poured herself another glass of champagne and mused, now that is a strange thing. A friend of mine phones from Clareville to say she's seen Sarah getting out of some man's car. And here's my Bill, says she's tucked up in bed, the right bed. Haven't we expanded on this? Well, yes, we have. It's about 4 times as long as far as the word count goes. But now we're actually seeing two characters operating against one another. We're getting Bill's opinion of his mother, not just that he was furious about her. But when he says, he acknowledges that he is trying to keep his cool, but he knows his mother is a picture of control, of course. And of course is very much Bill's POV we're hearing here, a strong point of view. This was her special field. So this is his opinion of his mother. That is a very caustic remark. And then we get a look at mother and we are inclined to agree with him. Of course, that's the way it's been written. With deliberation, she poured herself another glass of champagne. So she knows that he's nettled, that he's upset, and she's taking a certain pleasure in this. And what she then says needles him. Right? She's poking fun at him. Here's my Bill, says she's tucked up in bed, and just to rub it in, the right bed. So she does come across as a rather nasty type. It could be totally rewritten to show that she's a very caring, concerned mother, but that's not the way the story goes. Before we move on, just take a good look at that. Look at how we've taken simple statements like he refused to believe it and he was furious and blown it wide open. Let us look at it and make those conclusions ourselves. It's the next bit. We've added now, we're moving along to, now he had to see Sarah that night. The seeds of doubt had been sown. He yelled a few home truths to his mother, and he storms out. Let's have a look at the home truths that he yells at his mother. You remember the mother had said one of her friends had phoned from Clareville. So Bill says, friend, one of your network of nasty little spies. He knew he'd lost. He was spluttering like he always did when beaten. You're obscene, a bone-picking vulture. He spun round, strode blindly down the hallway, blundering into a hat stand as he went. With a sense of release, he burst into the cold night air, taking great gulps into his lungs. He crunched across the wide gravel drive. He knew not to look behind. She would be leaning nonchalantly in the doorway, sipping her victory champagne. Yes, she had won all right. He was scurrying home to check on Sarah, just the way she planned it. All right, we get a lot more in this. Not only do we know that he was angry and he was going home to check on the wife and he was furious, but we're starting to see the relationship with the mother, this sense that he knew he couldn't beat his mother, he always lost. And so he, even as he's shouting abuse at her and calling her a bone-picking vulture, he's acknowledging that he's lost, that she's won. So we're getting a lot of this sort of stuff coming straight out of his head. It's not the author saying, Bill has lost, right? It's Bill acknowledging it within himself. Now, the next bit, it sounded active enough as it was. He stormed out of the house, jumped into the car and slammed the door. But look at the way we've demonstrated these things. He strode blindly down the hallway, blundering into a hat stand as he went. Now, this does convey far more than just he stormed out of the house. We're seeing that he's in such a fluster that he can't think straight. He can't even walk straight. Now we're getting the reader's senses involved. We can almost feel him hitting that hat stand. We can feel that cold night air coming in big gulps, perhaps an audible thing there. We get an audible sense when he crunches across the gravel drive. And we're back in his head again with he knew not to look behind. Mother would be there, nonchalantly leaning in the doorway. And he finally admits he's scurrying home to check on Sarah, just the way his mother had planned it. So far more is coming into this by spelling it out for the reader, by playing it out, I should say, for the reader. Next little bit. He was so mad, in fact. Now there's a telling statement, that he threw caution and common sense to the wind. Well, what does the author mean by caution and common sense? We all understand what accelerating so hard that the car swerved and gravel sprayed from under the wheels. Quite a good image. We can all see that gravel spraying. Let's see if we can do more with it. We've got him coming out of the house almost blindly. I could imagine his hands shaking, and that's what emerges now. He fumbled and dropped the keys as he reefed on the door. What a fool he must have looked. He's very conscious of his mother staring at him, very conscious of his own sense of inferiority here. What a fool he must have looked. Then, trying to insert the key in the ignition with shaking hands, he did it again. He saw himself as if from above, ludicrous, his head wedged between his knees as he swore and pattered around in the grit, prickles and burrs on the floor, trying to locate the damn things. We're very much in his head, aren't we? The narrator is not going to use the word damned. Not that it's a terrible word. It's just that when you're doing a hidden narrator, an invisible narrator, you don't expose yourself by using colloquial terms. You try to keep your language as neutral as possible. So when we do see colloquial language, swear words perhaps, we know we're in the character's head. So this is quite a strong image of Bill rummaging around on the floor, feeling quite defeated. So what happens next? We heard in the original that he accelerated so hard that the car swerved and gravel sprayed from under the wheels. That's good enough, but look what extra little dimension we get in the new version. Finally, engine started. He revved the vehicle just the way he used to when he was 16.
He let the clutch out abruptly, sending a retaliatory spray of gravel in his mother's direction as the big Ford fishtailed down the drive. Now, I feel that that's a pretty good touch, the retaliatory spray. This is all he could offer in response to his mother, was to throw a bit of gravel at her, all right? So it's quite a good image here that adds to how Bill feels. The car didn't just spray gravel, it was retaliatory. And look at how much larger that slab of writing is to the 2.5 lines in the original. Moving right along. Now we have him driving, and the old bit says, down the long tree line drive he sped, the car gathering speed, etc., etc. Let's have a look at the new version. Here we get a lot more imagery. We tap into the reader's senses. Trees flickered past as the headlights caught them momentarily. I think we can picture that. And now we get some backstory, incredibly tucked in here. Trees he had once hidden behind, playing hide and seek with his brothers. So this tells us this is the family home he's returned to, where mother is, right? A broad, wet oak leaf slapped against the windshield and clung. I think we can picture that and almost feel it. And is it a bit like a slap in the face, perhaps? Is it symbolic of the pie in the face? Because look what he reveals next. Clareville, she said. His mother could not possibly know that Robert Tyrrell had moved to Clareville. Tyrrell, the fling, the indiscretion, Sarah said, was stale news. So his mother really has pricked his bubble. The very fact that she mentioned Clareville, he knew that the supposedly ex-lover was there. So I think we can take that wet oak leaf slapping against the windscreen rather symbolically. And now there's a slight change in the attitude we see emerging. He became aware that his hands were aching. He'd been gripping the wheel as if it were his mother's throat, or maybe Sarah's pretty neck. Yes, his rage at his mother was just anger at recognizing the truth. Some great admissions there, a little bit of self-understanding perhaps. And the final bit, forgetting that the bend ahead concealed a railway crossing, fairly bland way of putting it. And in this one we had, he slid the car around the bend. The crossing! The gates were down. A near invisible line of dark grey freight wagon led across the road. So here we're participating in his first sight of the wagons, the freight wagons, and the gates being down, rather than just being told about it. We're hearing his anguish. Well, I hope that that's a useful exercise for you, to be able to see how you can take individual little bits and expand them by getting into a strong point of view and, of course, showing instead of telling. Now, if you like this exercise, I am very happy to write one which you can access. I can write the very telly one, and then you can try and dissect it and change various lines and expand them into a show document. Very good exercise. If you'd like it, just email and I will send it to you.
Well, that's all for lesson 12. Come back next week in a lesson 13. Now, you're not allowed to dodge unlucky lesson 13. All right, come back for lesson 12A, where I'll talk about showing, not telling, when it comes to description of character. When you're describing a character, it's also important not just to tell the reader, but to show them what your characters look like. So that's lesson 13. Meanwhile, I have some written exercises prepared that will give you practice in finding and correcting all manner of show don't tell problems. If you'd like to work your way through those and give yourself some practice, test yourself on them, you're very welcome to them. Send me an email. My email address will follow shortly. Send me an email and I will send those to you quite happily. One last thing before I go. Do you realise today is the closing date of the Best First Chapter competition? The competition that can win you $600 or $700 worth of mentoring, a full year's mentoring. Well worth entering. Today's the closing date. just for you. I will extend it to next Monday. You've got a weekend to get your work in. So a last chance to get your opening chapter in, can be any genre. Keep it to under 2,000 words if you can, around the 2,000 word mark. If it's longer, I won't read beyond about that page. If you haven't hooked me by then, it's not a good chapter. Okay. Until next week, bye from me and keep safe. Keep away from COVID-19.